Remember when the kitchen smelled like butter, coffee, and Sunday supper? When every dish was made from scratch, every crumb counted, and every trick was a lesson passed from one generation to the next. In the 1950s, housewives ran their homes like small, efficient empires, keeping meals hearty, waist low, and pride high. Their secrets weren't written in cookbooks, they were whispered across fences, printed in the margins of church newsletters, and taught over the hum of a percolator. Let's open the door to those kitchens again and rediscover 30 clever tricks that made life smoother, food tastier, and homemaking a quiet art of ingenuity. Buttered burgers in the oven. Not every home had a shiny grill in the backyard, and frying on the stovetop made a greasy mess. The solution was simple. Shape the patties, line them on a baking sheet, and crown each one with a pat of butter. As they baked, the butter melted down, basting the meat and keeping it tender. Some women added a slice of onion beneath, or mixed in Lipton onion soup powder. The height of modern convenience back then. The smell filled the house and sent children running to the table long before supper was served. When drive-thrus and TV dinners took over, the oven burger vanished, but anyone who remembers it still swears it was the juiciest burger ever made. Mayonnaise and cake batter. Every 1950s pantry had a jar of mayo, Duke's in the South, Hellman's up north, and thrifty bakers knew it wasn't just for sandwiches. A scoop of mayonnaise stood in for eggs and oil, turning chocolate or spice cakes into moist, velvety wonders that stayed soft under a glass dome for days. It was a wartime holdover that saved families money and still delivered perfection. Ask an old-fashioned cook today, and she'll smile. Nothing beats a mayo cake, dear. Storing lettuce with paper towels. Before plastic bags and triple-washed greens, keeping lettuce crisp took real know-how. Housewives would wash each leaf, wrap them gently in a damp paper towel, and tuck them in the fridge. The towel soaked up just enough moisture to keep the lettuce fresh for days. The method spread from neighbor to neighbor, through good housekeeping columns and gossip over bridge tables. It worked, and it cost almost nothing. Freezing leftovers in coffee cans. Before Tupperware and stackable Pyrex, resourceful housewives turned to something already sitting on their counters, the sturdy metal coffee can. After supper, leftover soups, stews, and casseroles were poured into clean Maxwell House or Folgers tins. Once frozen, the contents slid out in perfect cylinders, ready to reheat or slice. Labeled neatly with masking tape, they stacked like soldiers in chest freezers across America, practical, space-saving, and frugal. Some women kept a full week's worth of meals preserved this way, always prepared for surprise guests or busy nights. It wasn't glamorous, but it was efficient long before meal prep became a trend. Opening a freezer full of silver tins felt like opening a vault of security. Proof that nothing went to waste and tomorrow's dinner was already handled. It was thrift, planning, and homemaking genius sealed inside every recycled can. A pinch of salt in the coffee pot. Morning coffee in the 1950s wasn't brewed by machines or pods. It bubbled in percolators, strong enough to wake the neighborhood. But those percolators often left coffee bitter, especially if it sat too long on the stove. Housewives had a quiet fix, a pinch of salt. Just a tiny dash sprinkled into the grounds softened the bitterness and smoothed the flavor, turning harsh into heavenly. It wasn't a magazine recipe. It was word-of-mouth wisdom, shared over back fences and Sunday chats. The trick spread quietly until it became instinct. Making coffee meant adding salt, period. Brands like Folgers and Maxwell House never mentioned it, but everyone knew. The first sip told you whether someone remembered the pinch or not. It was a small act of care in the morning rush. Proof that even the simplest rituals could taste like love and calm before a long day. The ice cube trick for perfect deviled eggs. In kitchens where presentation mattered, deviled eggs were the pride of every church potluck. But peeling boiled eggs? That was war. Sticky shells tore the whites, leaving ugly craters instead of smooth halves. Then came the ice cube trick. Housewives learned that plunging eggs into a bowl of icy water right after boiling caused the shells to loosen and slip off cleanly. Sometimes, they even cracked them first before the plunge, letting the cold water sneak beneath the shell. It was quick, satisfying, and a little bit magical. A simple act that turned frustration into triumph. Women passed the secret along at bridge clubs and Sunday socials, swearing it saved hours of grief before big gatherings. Once you mastered it, your platter of deviled eggs looked perfect, smooth, shiny, and ready to impress. A small victory, maybe, but one that felt mighty sweet at supper time. String for perfectly sliced cake. Long before fancy knives or cake slicers, 1950s bakers relied on something humble but brilliant: a piece of kitchen string. Held taut and pulled down through a frosted cake, it created slices clean enough to rival a bakery. Some clever women even used unflavored dental floss for extra precision. The result? No crumbs, no smudged icing, and perfectly even wedges for guests. It was practical magic, shared in women's magazines and whispered at bake sales. Whether cutting an airy angel food cake or a dense chocolate layer, the string made every dessert look like a masterpiece. Housewives loved that it required no gadgets, no cleanup, just resourcefulness. In a decade that prized presentation, a neat slice meant pride. Every polished plate of even, perfect pieces wasn't just dessert. It was a little show of grace, patience, and domestic artistry at its sweetest. Wax paper, the non-stick hero. Before parchment paper and silicone mats filled grocery aisles, wax paper was the kitchen's silent champion. Housewives used it for everything: lining cookie trays, wrapping sandwiches, layering cheese slices, or covering frosted cakes. A simple sheet could prevent sticking, preserve freshness, and even keep refrigerator shelves clean. Children recognized it instantly. The crinkly wrapper around every peanut butter and jelly sandwich in their lunchbox. Some women even rubbed wax paper on freezer shelves to keep them from rusting. It was cheap, versatile, and endlessly reusable. A miracle material long before the word eco-friendly existed. Reynolds called it magic paper, and they weren't wrong. Every household kept a roll in the drawer, and when the bright blue box appeared on the counter, you knew baking day had begun. It was humble innovation at its best. Simple, smart, and shining quietly beneath every cookie ever made. Bread to keep sugar, soft humidity, was the sworn enemy of every 1950s kitchen, turning sugar into stubborn bricks overnight. Housewives found a gentle, ingenious fix: a slice of fresh bread. Tucked into the sugar jar or canister, it absorbed excess moisture and kept granules soft, scoopable, and ready for morning coffee or baking day. Some used apple slices for a faint sweetness, but bread was reliable, always on hand and always effective. It was one of those unspoken tricks everyone knew but nobody wrote down, passed along through habit more than instruction. Peek into any mid-century pantry, and you'd likely find a lonely piece of Wonder Bread doing its quiet duty among the sugar crystals. Simple, thrifty, and surprisingly scientific, the bread trick proved once again that homemakers of the 1950s didn't need fancy gadgets, just common sense, observation, and a knack for turning problems into easy, elegant solutions. Chilling bowls for whipped cream. Whipped cream wasn't just dessert topping in the 1950s. It was a sign of effort and care. But in warm kitchens, even the best cream could collapse before it reached the pie. The answer was chilling, a time-honored ritual passed down through generations. Housewives placed the mixing bowl and beaters in the icebox ahead of time. When cold metal met cold cream, the magic happened fast. The mixture thickened beautifully, rising into soft peaks that stayed proud long after dessert was served. It was more than a trick. It was preparation, patience, and pride in every detail. Some women chilled the bowl overnight if company was coming, ensuring perfection. When aerosol whipped toppings appeared in the 60s, the ritual faded, but those who knew the old way still insist nothing tastes quite like hand-whipped cream from a frosty bowl. Silky, airy, and made with love. Vinegar to rescue burnt pans. Even the most careful cook scorched a pan now and then. Oatmeal left too long, gravy cooked a bit too hot. Instead of scrubbing furiously and risking the finish, 1950s housewives turned to a humble miracle: vinegar. Just a splash poured into the pan, topped with a little water, and left to simmer gently. Within minutes, the acid loosened the blackened bits, releasing them with a soft hiss. The sharp, tangy scent filled the kitchen, a sure sign that patience and thrift were hard at work. When the pan gleamed again, it wasn't just clean, it was redeemed. Vinegar was every woman's secret weapon, doubling as a glass polish, sink deodorizer, and even window cleaner. In an age before expensive detergents, one bottle of Heinz vinegar could do it all. It was simple chemistry in an apron, proof that nothing, not even a burnt pan, was beyond saving. Celery revived in water. In 1950s, kitchen celery was a staple, tucked into casseroles, spread with pimento cheese, or served proudly on relish trays for company. But limp celery was a heartbreak. Throwing it out wasn't an option, so housewives devised a gentle fix: resurrection by water. Standing the stalks upright in a glass of cold water, sometimes with a few ice cubes, revived their snap and shine within hours. The transformation was oddly satisfying. From wilted to crisp, from forgotten to fresh. Children loved watching the stalks perk up again, hearing that cheerful crack when they bit in. Magazines like Good Housekeeping called it kitchen science at its finest, though most women simply called it common sense. It was one more way to stretch groceries and avoid waste, a small daily victory in a time when thrift and care were the quiet marks of a capable homemaker. Cleaning cast iron with salt. A cast iron skillet wasn't just cookware, it was an heirloom. In the South especially, women guarded their skillets like family treasure. Soap was forbidden. It stripped away the sacred seasoning that gave every dish its depth of flavor. Instead, housewives used coarse salt. After frying bacon or chicken, they'd pour in a handful, scrubbing gently with a rag or a cut potato to lift grease and bits of food. The salt scoured without harm, leaving behind a smooth, seasoned finish. A quick wipe with lard sealed it for the next meal. Each skillet told a story, of Sunday breakfasts, of generations gathered around the table. Cleaning it wasn't a chore, it was care, a ritual that kept both the pan and its legacy alive. Long before nonstick became a buzzword, cast iron and salt proved that good maintenance was the truest form of love in the kitchen. Storing bacon grease in coffee jars. Nothing symbolized 1950s kitchen thrift like the bacon grease jar. After breakfast, women carefully poured the golden drippings through a strainer into an old coffee tin or glass jar, sometimes labeled with masking tape. It sat proudly beside the stove or in the icebox, waiting to flavor the next meal: green beans, cornbread, gravies, or fried potatoes. The rich aroma of bacon lingered, a promise of taste and comfort. Housewives didn't see waste, they saw opportunity. That jar was liquid gold, seasoning, tradition, and savings all in one. Some families even passed the same jar down, reusing it for years. By the 1970s, cholesterol fears and diet fads pushed it aside. But for anyone raised in that era, the sight of a coffee jar half full of amber grease brings instant nostalgia. It wasn't just fat, it was flavor, history, and the art of making the most of everything. Mason jars as everyday helpers. Before they were trendy decor, mason jars were the backbone of the kitchen. They held pickles, leftover soup, pudding, dry beans, and sweet tea. Each jar meant storage, savings, and security. If a house had a row of mason jars, it was a house that never went hungry. Ice cube trays for leftover stock. Nothing went to waste, not even the broth from Sunday's chicken dinner. Women poured cooled stock into aluminum ice cube trays. Once frozen, the cubes could be popped out, ready to drop into sauces or soups later. Kids sometimes mistook them for ice cubes, a reminder that cleverness and humor often shared the same kitchen. Newspaper for grease and odors. Before paper towels became cheap, yesterday's paper was too useful to toss. Housewives laid fried chicken on the classifieds to soak up grease, wiped spills with headlines, and even stuffed crumpled pages into shoes to remove odors. It was messy, it was practical, and it worked. Flour sack towels for everything. After the flour was gone, the sack lived on. Washed, bleached, and hemmed, the soft fabric became dish towels, aprons, and polishing cloths. Many women embroidered the edges, turning thrift into beauty. A flour sack towel wasn't just useful, it was personal, proof that nothing simple stayed ordinary for long. Potato water for gravy. That cloudy water left after boiling potatoes was liquid gold. It thickened gravies, added body to soups, and even made bread rise higher. Every thrifty homemaker saved it, knowing every bit of starch could stretch a meal further. Rolling pie crusts with jars. Not every kitchen had a rolling pin, but every kitchen had a glass bottle. Coke bottles, peanut butter jars, even vinegar bottles did the job just fine. Chilled first in the icebox, they rolled dough perfectly. It was a small example of how creativity filled the gaps that money couldn't. Toothpicks to test cakes. Without digital timers or fancy thermometers, women relied on the simplest tool in the house. A toothpick poked into the center told the truth. Clean meant done. Crumbs meant wait. It was a test of patience, precision, and intuition, qualities that defined the best home bakers of the decade. Potato slices to fix salty soup. Too much salt? No panic. A few raw potato slices simmered in the pot would draw the salt right out. It was a quiet kind of kitchen magic, humble, reliable, and passed down through countless oops moments at the stove. Waxing cheese to make it last. Freezers were small and cheese spoiled fast. Housewives melted paraffin wax, dipped blocks of cheddar and sealed them tight. The wax kept air and mold out, letting cheese stay fresh for weeks. When commercial wrapping came along, the practice faded. But it was an art of preservation that felt almost alchemical. Hanging dishcloths in the sun. Kitchens were humid, and damp rags could sour overnight. So women pinned their dishcloths outside, letting sunlight bleach and freshen them. A row of white cloths fluttering in the breeze was a sign of order, discipline, and quiet pride. Keeping brown sugar soft with marshmallows. Brown sugar hardened quickly in those tin canisters. Dropping in a marshmallow kept it moist and scoopable. A sweet little secret that made baking smoother. Children loved finding the candy hiding in the jar, never realizing it was there for science, not snacking. Toothpaste for polishing silver. Before fancy cleaners, toothpaste was the quick fix for tarnished silver. A dab and a rub brought back the shine on flatware and teapots. It smelled odd, perhaps, but it gleamed like new, proof that a little ingenuity could replace a whole shelf of products. A damp cloth over salad. Before plastic wrap and Tupperware, freshness depended on ingenuity. When hosting a luncheon, every 1950s hostess wanted her potato salad creamy and her lettuce crisp, even hours after preparation. The secret was a damp cloth, a clean towel, lightly moistened and draped across the bowl. The cloth acted as a natural barrier, keeping cool air in and warm air out, slowing wilting while preserving flavor. Some women chilled the towel first in the icebox for extra freshness, turning a simple trick into a mark of care. At church picnics or bridge clubs, you'd see rows of dishes neatly covered with embroidered cloths, part practicality, part pride. The method may seem old-fashioned now, but it worked beautifully. In a time before cling film and insulated containers, a damp towel wasn't just fabric, it was foresight, elegance, and the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her kitchen by heart. Shaking cream in a jar for butter. In the 1950s, butter wasn't always something you bought. Sometimes it was something you made. Housewives poured heavy cream into a mason jar, sealed it tight, and passed it around the family. Each shake brought the mixture closer to transformation, from cream to foam to a soft golden lump. A pinch of salt, a rinse with cold water, and fresh butter was ready for biscuits that night. For children, it felt like magic. For mothers, it was self-sufficiency. Even suburban kitchens joined in, turning an afternoon chore into a small celebration. Better Homes and Gardens praised it as both thrifty and wholesome. Though margarine and factory butter soon took over, the memory of that rhythmic shaking, the sound of effort turning into reward, never faded. It was the perfect 1950s lesson that patience, motion, and a little work could turn the ordinary into something extraordinary. Rice in the salt shaker. Every kitchen had one, a glass salt shaker that rattled faintly when you picked it up. Inside were a few grains of rice, the unsung heroes of humid summer kitchens. When moisture made salt clump into hard lumps, a handful of uncooked rice kept it dry and free-flowing. It was an old trick, simple but effective, passed quietly from mother to daughter. Housewives didn't need to understand chemistry, they just knew it worked. The soft rattle became part of kitchen life, a comforting sound as familiar as the morning percolator. Morton Salt even nodded to the habit with their famous slogan, "When it rains, it pours." Modern anti-caking agents made the rice unnecessary, but for those who remember the era, the tiny rattle in the salt shaker is pure nostalgia. Proof that cleverness often hides in the smallest, most ordinary details of daily life. Hanging bananas to slow ripening. In the 1950s, fruit was precious, and bananas ripened fast in warm kitchens. Housewives found an elegant fix: hang them. By suspending bananas from a hook or stand, air could circulate freely, slowing the ripening process and preventing bruises. It was a small act of preservation that extended their life by days, valuable when every grocery trip counted. Some women hung them from cupboard handles, others used decorative brass hooks near the bread box. It became a subtle symbol of order and care, the kind of trick that spread by word of mouth rather than magazines. Children would sneak one on their way to school, while the rest stayed perfectly golden for days. Today, banana hangers are sold as gadgets, but the idea was born from the quiet ingenuity of 1950s homemakers. Women who knew that a little air and a lot of thought could make everything last longer. The kitchens of the 1950s didn't have digital scales, microwaves, or pre-cut anything, but they had something better: women who understood how to make the most of what they had. From buttered burgers to paper towel lettuce, from mayo cakes to coffee can leftovers, these tricks were acts of everyday brilliance. They saved time, stretched ingredients, and turned ordinary homes into warm, thriving places of comfort and care. Those small lessons, thrift, patience, creativity, still matter. So the next time you reach for a gadget or a shortcut, remember the quiet wisdom that built generations of family tables. And if you grew up watching your mother or grandmother use any of these tricks, share your memories in the comments below. Because every little story keeps that golden age of home cooking alive.